Code of Jewish Law, and we are doing chapter 80, and we're up to number 44. 44, Mem Dalet. Okay. So also the Kaloya, it's forbidden. You're not allowed to braid or lace or weave a filu shnei chutin, even if it's only 2 threads, or syros or hatulushos, or 2 hairs that are no longer connected. So as we said before, all the things that we can't do on Shabbos, the 39 malachas, the 39 activities, all correspond to the 39 techniques with which they used to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert. When during the 40 years, well, to be technical, during the first year, that after the Jews exited Egypt, so they wove. There were curtains and various things that were woven. So weaving was one of the 39 techniques they used to create the Mishkan, and therefore it's one of the things that we can't do. Most people don't weave at home anymore. So it's not something, I'm not sure how relevant it'll be for people. In our school here, we have a hand weaver that sits on a table. So we can actually show the children what weaving actually is. Most people have never seen it. Okay, 45.
Rabbi, girls braid their hair.
Yes, we discussed this in an earlier one. The braiding, when hair's connected, then it's not weaving. So over here we had we mentioned hair that's loose hair, that's being separated, but the braiding hair is actually an offshoot of building, right? Creating the braids. So as you can see, I don't braid my hair too often, so I haven't had that issue. That's what happens. Mem Hey 45. So just to give an introduction, we're going to discuss tying knots. So as they assembled this tent, the Mishkan essentially was a giant tent. So there were pegs and they would tie knots. So the definition of a knot, as we're going to explain over here, is a knot that will last, when we say permanently, it doesn't mean that you tie a knot and it'll last 1,000 years. What we do mean, though, it will last more than 24 hours. So, a proper knot. And the other factor that can make a difference is it the type of knot, do you have the intention to untie it within 24 hours? And so we'll discuss these 2 factors in this chapter. Haderech, so the norm. When you're tying a knot, what's the normal thing? So when you want to tie something, with two strings, or meshichos, or 2 ropes, or you're wrapping 1 rope or string, and then you tie the 2 ends together like a belt. So either 2 independent strings or the 2 ends of 1 string or rope. So what do? You make 1 knot on top of the other, a double knot, in other words. Why do you do a double knot? A single knot won't hold. It's not strong enough. It'll come undone. So that's the norm. The also last place came to Shabbos, and you can't do this on Shabbos. You can't make a knot like this. one knot on top of the other. You can't make a double knot. Even if it's something that it's normal to untie it that day. So when we say that day, it means within 24 hours. So not necessarily the same calendar day, but within 24 hours. So if it's a double knot, that could be a, we'll call it a permanent knot for lack of a better term. Even if you intend to untie it within 24 hours, we can't make this kind of knot on Shabbos, because that's the type of knot that they made in the Mishkan. So he's giving advice. Therefore, you have to be careful with scarves that you wrap around your neck. So we don't use these in Arizona. And we didn't use them where I live in Australia either. But in many places in the world, you wrap a scarf around your neck in winter. And some people, to hold it in place, do a double knot. So you have to be careful. Not to make two knots on Shabbos to hold it into place. Because we can't do a double knot. But then we've got another interesting point. Erev Shabbos, even on Friday, on Erev Shabbos, the day before Shabbos, so you're about to go out, let's say Friday afternoon, it's half an hour before Shabbos, and you're going to shul. Even then, you can't do the double knot. Don't do two knots. Why? I mean, you're technically allowed to do that on Friday, but there's going to be a side problem. Dim Kane, because if you do tie a double knot, also the common, then you're not allowed to untie it on Shabbos. Right? Because as we know with many of these malachas, there's the reverse. So for example, last week, I believe, or the week before, we discussed a building. So building is one of the things that we can't do on Shabbos, and demolishing is the reverse. But of course, the definition of demolishing means demolishing in order to build, right? Not talking about just destructive vandalism. Of course, that's a different prohibition, but it's not the Shabbos prohibition. So untying knots, let's use shoelaces as an example. So untying is a problem, is a malacha, just like tying is. And we're going to discuss shoes a little bit further. So I might as well mention it now, since I already mentioned it. So anything that's a double knot, so tying shoelaces. So if we can't make a permanent knot, so we're going to mention it shortly. We're going to say that normally we sort of do I guess we'll call it a knot, a loop, and then you do a bow with shoelaces. So if you do a double bow, that holds it tight. So that's problematic on Shabbos. But a single bow, you can do that. Of course, you can also get slip-on shoes for Shabbos. Or Velcro, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so so we can't do we have to be careful not to tie a scarf in a double knot on Shabbos. And since we want to be able to untie it on Shabbos, presumably you don't want to wear a scarf from the beginning of Shabbos all the way to the end of Shabbos. You need to make sure when you put it on before Shabbos, you don't do a double knot, because otherwise you won't be able to untie it. Now, when we said a double knot is what makes something permanent, that's when it's two ropes. So you're tying two ropes together, or the two ends of one rope. But if you're just tying a knot in one end, then a single knot also stays. If you pull it tight, single knot just on one end, so it's just one rope, not two, and you make a knot in one end. If it's pulled tight, it'll stay. So likewise, if we do that to make a single knot, or if you put two ends together and tie them with a single knot, you put it together. Awesome. This is forbidden because this again is going to make a tight, permanent knot. Because when you have like this one rope, for example, and you just tie one knot, since there's only one, it'll stay tight. We'll call it permanent for lack of better translation. And again, just to remind everyone, because I'm on the phone with a Zoom, I can only see a few people at once. So if you have a question, don't raise your hand. I'm flicking every now and then from screen to screen, so I can see everyone, but I don't see everyone at once. So if you have a question, just unmute, ask the question. Don't feel shy. Now, if you take the two ends and you make one knot with like a loop over the top, then that's not permanent. So therefore, if it's something that you're planning to undo that day, and again, the definition of day is within 24 hours, then mutter, it's allowed. So let's give an example here. Shoelaces. If you tie, one knot with a bow, it's a single bow, and your intention is to untie them within 24 hours, then it's not a permanent knot, and you're tying it within 24 hours, that's fine. If though, some people, they tie their shoelaces once, however long, once a week, however long it lasts, and they slip their feet in and out, and they leave their shoelaces tied up, then even if it's a non-permanent knot, but you're going to leave it for the 24 hours, then you can't do that either. So there's something to bear in mind. The imlav, and if you're not planning to undo it within 24 hours, awesome. Then you're not allowed to tie it on Shabbos. Sorry. The imlav also feel imhu. Then if it's not a casual knot, if it's a permanent knot, that even if you do intend to untie it, you can't have it on Shabbos. But if you're going to make loops over each other, sometimes the loops just hold it in place. The mutter, that's allowed. But fill a harbe, even if you put many loops around, just wrap it around, hold it in place, that's no problem. But fill him died to shamid ken yomim rabim, even if you plan to leave it like that for many days. If it's just looped around and around, then there is no problem, there's no knot. Okay, so that was 44. Any questions before we move on?
Yes.
So actually,
I got two of us. Okay, Ben, you first. Ben? I'll go first.
go ahead.
Okay. So you
Go
said that
ahead.
if you have a knot that is not permanent, even if you intend to untie it during Shabbos, you cannot make such a knot.
No. So the two
If
things that you need,
you also said, okay, what?
it needs to be not permanent, and you intend to untie it, you need within 24 hours, you need those two conditions. So if it's permanent, regardless of how soon you're going to untie it, it can't be used. And if it's not permanent, but you're planning to leave it for 24 hours, then it can't be used. So for this to be able to tie this knot on Shabbos, you need two conditions. Condition number one, not a permanent knot. Condition number two, you intend to untie it within 24 hours.
Okay, and within those 24 hours could be during Shabbos or after Shabbos?
Correct.
Okay, that was my question. Ben?
Yeah.
Okay, that was basically what I was going to say. It's easier to say don't tie any knots on Shabbos, except if it's going to be a non-permanent knot. Like a loop is a non-permanent knot.
Yes.
That's why it's allowed.
Yes. So obvious, easier to avoid knots altogether. But, if we're using shoelaces as an example,
Right.
depends what shoes you have. So it happens to be, I have slip-on shoes for Shabbos. Not so much because the knots, just more comfortable. So I avoid the problem.
Right.
But, I have noticed people wear slip-on shoes a lot more on Shabbos than during the week. Perhaps it's because of this.
So even loops then are considered, if you're going to leave the loop for 24 hours, you cannot have it on Shabbos.
So loops, by loops, I don't mean a bow. I mean if you wrap something round. So a loop where you wrap something round to hold it in place, that's not considered a knot at all. So you can leave that as long as you like. But the way most people tie shoelaces, they do like a single knot and then a double bow. So that would be considered a permanent knot. But if they did that little knot and then a single bow, it doesn't last. It comes undone.
Well, the thing you're calling a single knot before the bow is just taking the shoelace and putting it over and under.
Yes, correct.
That's half a knot.
Okay. Well, so that half a knot in the bow and a single bow, as long as you're intending to undo it within 24 hours, is fine. So when you make it the double bow, then it becomes a permanent knot.
So you can do that on Shabbos because you plan on tying it. Is that what you just said?
So if you're doing that half a knot with a single bow that you mentioned,
yes,
and you're planning on untying it within 24 hours,
yes,
you can do that on Shabbos.
Okay, so you can put your shoes on and tie them on Shabbos. Good.
Yes.
What is the opinions on these twist tie things that come with a box of plastic bags?
So it depends how you're going to put them on, right? So you could just wrap it round, loop it round, which would be the looping. That's not the issue. If you sort of twist and twist and twist and twist, then you're essentially making a permanent knot.
If you wrap it around and twist it once.
Yeah, so if you wrapped it around a few times, even if it's tight, and then just do one sort of something to hold it, that's not permanent. But once you start, twisting and twisting, twisting, then it becomes like each one of these twists will be, I guess, pretty much like a knot.
Okay.
Okay.
Rabbi,
yeah.
in the last few years, maybe 5 years, 10 years, a lot of people are buying elastic laces. They lace them up once with the intention of that's the way that they should be. There's like a little clip that could be put on it to hold that length. And then they slip their shoes on and off every day. But they're elastic. They're like, heavy duty elastic laces.
Yes, so that's fine because they're not doing the knot. Likewise, you have some people who tie their shoes regularly and they just, can't be bothered doing and undoing their shoelaces every day. So they slip their feet in and out. So even if it is a permanent knot, as long as you're not tying that knot on Shabbos, you could make benefit from it. So you could put your feet in if you want or can, but it's the tying and untying that's the problem. Okay. 47. Kesher shasurim lasoisoi. Any knot that you're not allowed to make. Kesher kazeh asurim gankein lahatir. So as we mentioned this in discussion, but any knot that you're not allowed to tie, you also can't untie the same knots. So if you have a permanent knot, then you can't untie it either. The koim sar, a situation of pain, we'll give an example in a moment. Then we can have a non-Jew untied. So let's say, for example, a person's foot was swelling. So again, we're not talking about a situation where we've got this massive swelling and, God forbid, cut off circulation, the foot's going to fall off. Where it's uncomfortable. It hurts a little bit. So, and it's got a double knot. So the person can't untie it himself. That would be doing a full malacha on Shabbos, but he could ask a non-Jew to untie it for him. Right? So you can go out to the street, ask your neighbor, excuse me, can you untie my shoelaces? Pretend we're in preschool again.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
At the end of the previous halacha, I'm not sure if you said that sentence, and the sentence looks opposite of what you said before, this idea of tying two bows, one on top of the other. I thought you were saying that was like a double knot, and I don't remember hearing you say that last sentence, that it's okay to tie two or bows, one on top of the other.
I believe in this case, he's talking about looping something around.
So it's not like a person makes a shoe and ties the regular bow and then ties a bow on top of that.
No, it's making loops. Although a niva is normally is often translated as bow, but in this context it means making loops. So sometimes you want to hold something in place. You can wrap it around many times, it'll hold. But then this is allowed because there's no actual knots.
Okay, I got it.
Did you say not too long ago that even if you kept your shoes tied before Shabbos so that you can only slip in and out of them, and wore that knot on your shoe and didn't untie it until after Shabbos, it's still wrong to wear the shoe on Shabbos?
No, you can wear it. You can utilize the knot. You just can't tie it or untie it.
Okay, so you could prepare a knot in advance.
Yes.
If it's going to be taken all the way through.
Mentioned before, if it's going to go all the way through. What I did mention before was not tying it before Shabbos, because then you can get stuck with, right. That's right.
Some women's clothes have bows on them. That's why I asked.
Yes. So again, a single bow is not a problem. And we're going to mention the clothes as well in not the next one, but the one after.
What halacha are we on now?
48. Sorry, 47.
What was 46? I seem to go from 45 to 47.
So
we skipped on 46.
Do you have two 47s by chance?
47.
No, we have 45 and then 47.
46 was that whatever knot you're not allowed to tie, you also can't untie. That's 46.
Right. It's only 2 lines above 47.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a short one.
It gets lost.
Yep. Okay, 47. Derech hachiyotim. Now, the way that tailors work, and again, it's not many people go to the tailor to get their clothes made from scratch anymore. But when we did, or if you would, so the way they work is as follows: before they do the proper stitching, they do they hold it together with with wider stitches. They just do some type of, instead of very small stitches that are close to each other to hold it tightly, they do some loose stitching just to hold the pieces in place. And then you might have a fitting, and if it all goes well, then they'll sew it properly in place. Now, so that's this loose stitching they put in. And after they sew it properly, they remove this loose stitching. Now you can't remove this loose stitching on Shabbos. So again, we've I think had on a few weeks, we had this malacha, we had one of these techniques or creative acts that we can't do on Shabbos called makah patish. Literally means a hit with a hammer, but it's the last thing to complete something. So the example of hit with a hammer would be like you have, as we mentioned before, you have this chair, it's all in place, you got the final bolt is there, and it needs one hit with a hammer to hold it in place, and it's going to take the weight. So it's this last final act. And I think last week we mentioned an example, a modern day example of this are electric lights. You have the whole system set up, there's electricity connected, and the only reason the light is not on is because there's two little pieces that are about this far away from each other, and by flicking the switch you join them together, and that closes the circuit, and the current goes through and turns on the light. That tiny little, or just needs that one little tap, so to speak. So that is makah patish. We'll call it perfecting or completing something. So taking these stitches out, these temporary stitches, is the same idea. That's the final act of completing this garment. So they're going to need to be pulled out on Shabbos. Similar to this, sometimes when you buy a suit, the pockets are sewn closed, and they're not properly sewn, they're not properly stitched. There's got these loose threads, and by opening it up, now you have the use of a pocket that's completing the garment. So you need to do that before Shabbos. So if you get a new suit for a Yom Tov, it'll be the same thing. So open up those pockets if you're planning on using them. Maybe you'll find treasure inside. Who knows? Worth see what happens. So we need to remove any of these loose stitches and things before Shabbos.
Rabbi.
Yes.
I saw an interesting thing after last week where you were talking about the turning on and off the lights is that completing of the circuit. It's like building. And we heard for so many years it was like fire, turning on and off fire.
Yeah, so makah not building.
Right. So yeah, so after the class, I googled the question: is fire related to electricity, or is electricity related to fire? So what I came up with was that from 3rd grade and on in the United States, they teach kids that they're basically the same cause, which is a flow of electrons. Not until you get to college do they tell you what it really is, which is not the same thing. It's a completely different chemical reaction. And that's why people are confused. They think it's related to fire, turning on fire on and off, which I thought it was until you spoke last week.
Yeah, you look, I think, and also I think when electric bulbs first came out, a lot of people automatically assume that, because till then you had gas lamps, and it burnt, and then they replaced them with electric lamps, and I think there was just this presumption that it was the same thing. It's making light. We use the expression sometimes, the light bulb burnt out. It's so I think it's a very common misconception. But a lot of things, as technology is developed, I mean, we look at electric lights now as something very basic, not a technological advancement. But as things came out, people didn't understand. And often what happens, misconceptions are based on asking the wrong questions and getting the wrong answers. So as an example, unrelated to what we're discussing now, but when microphones first came out, a lot of Orthodox shuls used microphones on Shabbos. There was a misunderstanding. What happened is rabbis who didn't understand how a microphone works asked certain questions to people who understood how they do work, and they answered those questions. And although the people who understood how microphones work had information, which if they would have given the rabbis would have given them a different perspective, but they didn't know how halacha works. So they didn't know which information to give. So the people asking the questions didn't know which questions to ask, and the people giving the answers didn't know what information was relevant. So it came to a misunderstanding that you could use a microphone on Shabbos, which of course you can't. And it wasn't until later, was actually, interestingly, one of the first people to speak out against it was Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had a training as a engineer, and he obviously understood halacha. And so it was someone who understood halacha, understood how the machine works, and he explained it. And once it was explained to the people who knew halacha, then it became very obvious you can't use it. But when I was studying in New York 30 years ago, there was a shul that I davened in from time to time that had there was a little hole, where the chazan stands, where once upon a time there was a microphone. When people thought that it was allowed. So these misconceptions, unfortunately, are not new, and they're not unique.
Also, they said that because there can be electrical fires, people assume it's the electricity that's making the fire. It's the electricity heating a blanket or heating a burnable object, and that causes the fire. It's not electricity itself
Correct.
Turning into fire. It's turning into heat, and then it can turn into fire.
Correct. And now that you mention that, again, not related to what we're doing now, but just as we're discussing this idea that the electricity creates a heat, not a fire. Well, doesn't always create a heat, depends what the appliance is. But we know that on Yom Tov, you're allowed to light a flame from an existing flame. Right? So you can't light a new flame on Yom Tov, but you can light from an existing flame. So for example, you could light from a candle, from a gas, a stove. You have a gas stove, there's a flame. You cannot light from an electric stove, right? And some people don't realize this, and they'll light a mat or a candle or something from an electric stove because it's actually not a flame; it's just heat. Now it's hot enough to light the candle if you leave it there, but it's not a flame. It's just heat. There's no fire. All right. Any other questions on that before we move on? No? Okay. 48.
I'm sorry. I couldn't get my appliance to work here. Yes, I just wanted to point out, I know it's a very fine distinction, and I understand, and I'm, now aware, but like when they do say that an electric bulb burns out, there's a little filament inside that actually does burn. And it, the resistance, the heat, it actually, there's a little bit of a combustion inside it. You can tell because it's, the light of it is because it's glowing to the point where the heat is such that it actually carbonizes or burns the filament. So in that sense, a bulb could be burned out, but of course the electricity, we now understand it's closing the circuit. It's the finishing off that makes it the Isur, you know, generally speaking.
Yeah, and also depends what type of light bulb.
Yes, yes.
But that's right. Okay. So 48. Begodim hasuyim lahachnis behem meshicha or retzua. Clothes that are made that you insert a strip or a strap, or shoes as an example. We're going to mention examples, and you pull it tight, right? So it's just going for an example. Michnasayim, pants. So sometimes people have pants that have a strap on the top, and that's the belt. It's sort of built in, and you know pull tight the strap, and you tie a knot to you know keep it tight. Or menalim, or shoes, or choluk, sorry, or some type of like a robe type of thing. So now we're not talking about the knots, right? The knot, as we explained, the two conditions to be able to tie or untie the knot on Shabbos is that A, can't be a permanent knot, and B, the intention is to undo it within 24 hours. We're now talking about inserting the actual strap. So let's say, for example, shoelace, right? The shoe, there's no shoelace, and you put the shoelace, you sort of thread it through the, you know, the little holes, and you insert shoelaces into the shoe. Now, im beged chadosh, if it's brand new, meaning there has never been a shoelace in this shoe before, or never been this strap that in the top of the pants, then also lachnisa behem, you're not allowed to put the shoelace in for the first time, or the strap on Shabbos. Why? Meshum david tikkun manor. This is like completing the garment. Again, this is like perfecting the garment, perfecting the item, finishing the making of it. So it's another example. It's like a patish, like turning on the lights and different things. So the shoelace, the shoe without the shoelace, I'm not going to say it's not usable at all, but it's not usable for what it's designed for. You know, you can't walk fast, you can't run. You know, it does have its purpose. You know, if you just wanted to stand still and there's broken glass, you'd much rather wear shoes that didn't have a shoelace than be bare feet. You know, but what it's really designed for, you can't do without the shoelace. So you need the shoelace. Of a yashon, but if it's an older one, so there has been shoelaces in there before, it broke, or you took it out for whatever reason, then if the hole is not too narrow, so it's not like a you know, big trouble, or you know, hole. You know, sometimes when your shoelaces aren't too bad, but you know those the track pants or something that you know has the strap on the top. Forget about getting one in all the way from the beginning. You know, sometimes in the wash, you know, you lose an end. Just trying to get it out, right? It becomes a whole project in of itself. So if it's not too hard work and it's not new, it's not the first time, mutter, then it's allowed. But if it's going to be a tremendous amount of work, then you can't put it in on Shabbos. So probably shoelaces are the most common. So as I said, if it's a new shoe, it's never had a shoelace before, we can't put one in on Shabbos. But if it has had a shoelace, even though this Shabbos it didn't, then we can insert a new shoelace. Okay. 49.
Excuse me? Oops.
Yes.
Did you say the same thing about a belt going through the belt loops? You said something about a strap on pants.
Not a belt loop. So I didn't mean like a belt, you know, like a track pants that has a belt.
Oh, a drawstring type of
drawstring. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Belt and belt loops is not a problem. Two reasons. Number one, it's not part of the garment, so you're not, even though shoelaces aren't really part of the garment, either. But once you insert it, it's not the kind of thing you take in and out all the time. But a belt, some people leave a belt in their pants for a long time. But it's not unusual for people to change the belt in this pair of pants. They want different belt today, or that they want to use a belt for multiple pair of pants. So it's something that's designed to go in and out regularly. So it's not completing the pants. It's a separate object to the pants. The pants are usable even without a belt. Now, it could be for a certain person, he's they're a little loose, there's something, but pants in general are usable without a belt. But a shoe, without the shoelace, it's not usable for its purpose for anyone. No one can go running in a shoe that needs shoelaces if there's no shoelace.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problems. 49. So, Lepalmim ezet fira miskaleles mis pardois tichas ketsasoy mezoi. Now, sometimes in clothes, some of the stitching can become loose or break, and the garment starts to come apart at the seam a little bit. So, in that situation, again, we're talking about Shabbos. Now, sometimes you pull the loose thread, so this won't work if it tore, but the stitching came loose a little bit. You pull the thread. The hem is hard, or mischabrois, and then what happens? The loose parts tighten and they hold together. So that is also last this came to Shabbos. This you can't do on Shabbos. Mishum da habi toifer, because this is sewing. So as we said, there's two types of sewing you can't do on Shabbos, right? There's the sewing SOW, like planting seeds that we discussed in our first lesson. And there's the sewing SEW. So this activity, even though you did not actually stitch, right? The stitches are in the garment already. Even though you didn't actually do any stitching, but by pulling the stitching tight, you have closed the gap in the garment. So this is also considered sewing. Any questions on that one? Yeah, okay.
What about zips?
Rabbi,
Zip.
Yeah, zips are fine because zip is you're not pulling stitching, and the zip also again it's something that moves up and down. It's not a
Permanent.
when you put stitching clothes, it's sewn together. Maybe after tie a knot in the end to really hold it permanently, that you joined it. The zip is fine.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Is it that when a person pulls the hook, the line that closes the stitching, it's like a mechanical act that performs the sewing, even though you didn't actually do the stitching. Is that correct?
Well, it's by pulling the stitches tight. That's the act of sewing. So even though there's loose stitching that's there, I mean, it was tight at one stage, it's come loose now, and the garment's starting to come apart at the seam. But by pulling this thread, you close all those stitches properly. So it's similar enough to actually have sewn those threads.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay. 50. So, Nayarais Shnidbekul Shloi Bekavona. You have papers that got stuck together you didn't intend them to get stuck together. Right? So we're not talking about something that you deliberately glued or or you did binding of some sort, that's a separate issue that we'll speak about at a separate time. Either you had a pile of papers, or we're going to mention a book. So it says, Kamoi, for example, if I'm in Nidbakul Dape Sfarim, Machmas Hatseva, sometimes books get, the pages get stuck together because of the ink. Or glue, that was used by the bookbinder. Or by wax. Today, we don't normally read books by candlelight. We use have electric lights, much better for us. But in the past, they used candles. So sometimes you would tip the candle, get a better, shine more light where you're reading, and bits of wax can drip down. And then you close the book before the wax dried, and the page gets stuck. You're able to open these pages. So I want to clarify a few things here. Let's first say what we're not talking about. What we're not talking about is pages that were never separated. So again, sometimes you can buy a book, and at the bottom or the side or the top, there are pages that weren't cut properly, right? And you can't separate two pages because they're connected. That you cannot open on Shabbos. That would be tikkun keli, hatish. That's the same thing as as we said of completing or perfecting an item. We're talking about things that were separate, they're meant to be separate, and accidentally, someone spilled some wax, or a bit of glue got stuck on something, spilt on something, or some other sticky something, and it's unintentionally stuck, and you don't want it to be stuck, and they were separate. So it's separating those things that we can on Shabbos.
Rabbi, question.
Yes.
If you're separating pages that were never separated before, is it the malacha of giving the finishing blow, like the finishing touch, or is it the malacha of tearing?
In this case, it's the finishing blow, because the book, or at least part of the book, it's all there. Everything's printed. It's just not properly usable in its current state. And the small tear, now all of a sudden, it's usable. So sometimes things overlap. But, the primary thing that's happening here. There's a case in the Talmud brings that someone can eat, one piece of food and transgress, 7 things at once. So, okay, so someone's going to do something wrong. They're going to go all the way. But again, it's a theoretical situation. It was a chaylev, a type of fat that you're not allowed to eat, and it was from a sacrifice that went past its time. And it was Yom Kippur. There was a whole series of things. So a person could in theory, do many things at once. Actually, now that I said that, we should probably emphasize, because we don't want to leave something in negative. Of course, you can do something positive that can have multiple benefits at once. All right, so let's focus on that as well. So we are up to 51.
On the previous one,
Yes.
It had to be an unintentional sticking together to make it permissible.
Correct.
So you couldn't open up an envelope in the mail.
Correct.
Okay.
That's an excellent example. Thank you. Right, something that's deliberately being closed is a separate issue. Okay. 51. So, sometimes you still find fancy foods like this, but they used to sometimes close a jar. They put a little piece of cloth and then a little string holding the cloth on. Sometimes, fancy preserves or something, you see that. But generally, we have jar lids and things today. So those ones, mutter l'koram Shabbos, you're allowed to tear them on Shabbos. And this also applies to other packaging that we have on Shabbos. Why? Shizel mekalkal. This is destruction. Right? You tear open those packet of chips. That package, which until now was airtight and kept the food fresh, it's gone. Right? You've destroyed it. The mutter l'tzarech Shabbos, and you're allowed to do this if it is something that is for the sake of Shabbos. So, eating the chips, as an example, you want to, Shabbos is a mitzvah to have nice food. Not opening the envelope, which is not needed, it's not a Shabbos activity. Better not to read that gas bill on Shabbos. Let's leave it aside. Okay. Before we go to the next one, because it'll need a bit of introduction, and we might just do the introduction today, but I wanted to mention something slightly off topic. So today is the 23rd day of the Jewish month of Sivan. Now, for those history buffs, you will know that today in the Purim story, this was the day when Haman's decree against the Jews was undone. Right? The Jews got a new decree. So when Queen Esther fasted and she invited King Achashverosh and Haman to her party, that was Pesach time. Then Haman was executed, and then not long after that, as we know, Mordechai was appointed the prime minister in Haman's place, and they came and made a request. Can you undo the decree? He says you can't undo the decree. Anything signed with the king's royal seal can't be undone, but you can make any new decree you like. So new decrees were made, which eventually allowed the Jews to defend themselves. So the proposed damage, the planned damage that Haman's decree was going to cause, God forbid, was totally undone on this day. So this day spiritually has a power of undoing negative decrees, negative things. So unfortunately in life we all have things that aren't exactly the way we would like them to be, whether it's in health or people wanting children, or whatever happens to be, livelihood, so to speak, any negative decrees that might be against us. This is the day they can be torn up and undone. So today's an excellent day every day is an excellent day to daven, to pray to Hashem for various things. But today's a more spiritually potent day. It's a good day. Some people even have the custom, they write on a piece of paper whatever their problem is, and they tear it up. So the decree gets torn up today. So, we're getting to know each other, thank God. We're enjoying each other's company, but we haven't had the chance to really get to know each other personally well. So I'm hoping that everyone's lives are going wonderfully and there's no hassles. But if God forbid there are, today is the day to daven for it. Today's the day to write it down, tear it up, and get all those negative and bad decrees out of the way.
I'm just wondering, Rabbi, if this date can fall on Shabbos when you're not allowed to tear.
I can't recall off the top of my head being Shabbos, but having said that, I never paid attention to it. So that would be interesting. Well, then we just, would just be the praying in that case. That's an excellent point. Okay, I think we're time to squeeze in one more.
Actually, it's Pekuach Nefesh, so it's maybe okay to tear it up.
Well, probably not. I mean, although a bad decree against a person, so to speak, a problem could, God forbid, be Pekuach Nefesh, life-threatening situation. But the tearing it up is more of a symbolic, customary thing. It doesn't necessarily directly help the situation. Okay.
What was the point of Halakha 51? That was the leniency for opening up food?
Yes, tearing open food.
Okay. Are there any ways of opening food that are not permitted? Besides cutting letters, of course.
Yes. Well, that's pretty much the main thing. The only other potential issue is if you make a vessel out of it. I'm just making it up now. Let's say, for example, you had two bowls, and the packaging was these two bowls were stuck together, and close the food up inside. And then when a person breaks open, they now have two bowls. So they've actually created a utensil. So that could be another potential problem. But most things we have today aren't really an issue. Some people are hesitant to open up soda cans because of this. But you're not really making a utensil. You actually sort of spoilt it, because till now it stopped it going flat. It's carbonated, and now you've ruined it. Can't close properly again. So if someone asks me, I would say there's not a problem to open it. But there are some people who are careful about it, because once you've drunk the soda, you could theoretically, use this can for water or something else. You could use it for liquids again.
And taking the cover off of a Tupperware type of thing, those vessels that have threads on top, and a designed cover goes with it. And then unscrewing the cover leaves behind the bottom part. Is that permitted?
So, unscrewing? Oh, you mean turning it?
Turning it around, yeah.
No problem.
That's no problem.
Yeah,
the
no
bottom
problem.
part is a vessel, but it's not a problem.
Yeah, but they weren't actually ever connected as one piece.
No.
Talking about the same type of things like screwing on and off a bottle top. Similar.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear very clearly. What did you say about the cans of soda? You can open.
I'm going to tell you that you can, but I'm also letting you know some people tell you that you can't.
I see.
The ones that say you can't is because they say once you've drunk the soda, you now have a utensil you can fill up and use again.
Oh.
And the reason I say that you can, again, it's not me against, it's most people say that you can, is because essentially this, this Coke can, for example, was sealed. The purpose was to keep this drink carbonated, safe.
Yes.
And now you've actually ruined that that utensil that was designed for that. So people say you can open these cans, and that's what I would advise people. But I just mentioned there are those who are strict.
I see. It has nothing to do with the actual breaking of it or opening it.
Yeah, it's not the breaking of it. It's the question is, did you make a new utensil out of it?
That brings me to one more question.
Yes.
I've been told that a distinction between the Sephardic minhag and the Ashkenazi minhag is once one has lit the candle, you really not to open or rather unscrew a a bottle, well, I guess you would be breaking the little prongs in order to open one that a bottle of grape juice that was not opened before.
So you can open the bottle of grape juice. Again, you know, those little bits where it's sort of stuck. There are some people who particularly try and open them up before Shabbos, and it's the same issue. You know, are you making a new utensil? So most authorities, including myself, we're going to rule that it's not. You're not breaking you're not really creating a new utensil. But there are some people who, you know, be on the safe side. They just open up whatever bottles they're going to use before Shabbos. Another issue, the potential issue though, is sometimes you have the seals. And this is more of an issue.
Yes.
And it has the writing on the seal.
The writing, yes.
Yes, that's potentially more of an issue. And even if you can't tear it without doing the writing, you can always use a knife just to cut it in a different place if need be, and then open the bottle.
Yes.
Ezra, the rabbi said he can't see everybody, so you should just ask your question.
Okay.
Yes.
So I was told the following, that you can open up a can, for example, a can of beans, a can of tuna fish, whatever it is. Yes, you are creating a new vessel, but the fact of the matter is you have no intention to use that vessel to store things in it after you use it. So your intention is to throw it away. Once you have that intention, then there's no problem with creating a new vessel. And the same thing holds true for wine. I mean, we have a throwaway society. The fact of the matter is, we're going to open up a bottle of wine, use the wine, and then get rid of the bottle.
So that's correct, and that's the logic behind those who allow it. And as I said, if someone asked me, I would tell them not a problem. Just a side point, with the cans, like say tuna or baked beans, different things. Again, I'm not saying you need to do this, but there are some people who puncture a hole on the side or the bottom before they open it up, and that way they've really destroyed the vessel. And there's no question of creating a new vessel. So if you already do that, someone's already advised you to do that, then that's one thing to do. If you don't already do that, I guess don't bother. You know, it's not because as you said, you know, you're never intending to use this vessel. It's actually breaking or ruining the purpose of what it was until now, which was a protection around the food that's there. It no longer fills that function, and you have no intention to use it for what it could potentially be used for. So the others who are strict, the majority of people say it's fine.
Rabbi, I'm just wondering in relationship to what Ezra said, the fact that it's a designated utensil, can opener, is that a problem?
So there you do sort of get into different views. Many cans today have the ring pull. So that's not an issue.
No, Sammy, nor.
Yeah. So the can openers, it's now you're getting closer to a 50-50. Right? Till now, what I was telling you, majority allowed it, and you it was only a minority that said to be strict, and I feel very comfortably in a very comfortable light of that, saying don't worry about it. The can opener is a little more complicated, but if you do use one, you definitely have who to rely on. So if you get stuck, you have who to rely on. All right. Well, I guess the questions are taking us over time, but that's all right.
I have I have another question regarding tearing a package. If it's food, you're saying that it's not allowed to tear through the letters, even if it's
Ideally,
food?
because that's taking away the words. Having said that, there are authorities that say, you don't have to be so worried about that either. At least don't do it intentionally. But if it tore through the letters at all, don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And also not to tear on serrated edges either, because that's been designed for. That's finishing the
Finishing touch.
yeah. Okay. All right. So wish everyone an amazing week.